My name is Brian K. Marr, and I'm an 11-year Army veteran and a third generation of 4 serving the United States military. In November 1990, I was a captain serving in the Patriot Project Office as a research and development officer, my secondary, MOS as they called it back in those days. And I was getting ready to escort a Patriot battery over to Israel to protect our allies as the wind-up to the war began, when I got a call from my branch assignments officer that said, "We're reassigning you." And I said, "Okay." He said, "We're going to reassign you to the 3rd Army headquarters in Fort McPherson, Georgia." I said, "All right." And I was going to be a staff officer, fill out a position that is normally vacant during peacetime. So orders came and off I went. Boarded a plane, landed in Atlanta, and went through the in-processing, and which included being routed into a room very similar to this one and given a battery of shots in the arm and in the rump. And that particular episode was quite interesting as well. But at any rate, they took us to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and put us through a little mini basic training to refamiliar us staff officers that hadn't been with a combat unit for a while, and put us on a plane out of Charleston Air Force Base, and off we went to Bangor, Maine. We landed somewhere in Germany. I don't remember where it was. I think it might have been Rhein-Main. We got off the plane in Bangor and spent an hour or so on the ground, and then we landed in Rhein-Main, and then the next stop after that was at a desert airport in Saudi Arabia that had been built. It was an international airport that had been built in the middle of the desert that had never been used until us. And we used that as a place to land our planes, and then we marshaled the troops from there out to the various places and where they were going to be assigned. In my case, it was Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And I joined the G4 staff of the 3rd Army headquarters under Brigadier General Monroe. The one thing I remember about the war is that how quickly it happened. I mean, I was there from November of 1990 in the buildup, and the war kicked off in January, and before you knew it, it was over, it was gone, it was done. The thing that stuck with me the most, in a rear view kind of way, rear view mirror, was that we didn't really have a clue as to really what was going on out there. I mean, and we got a lot of our information from CNN, who had reporters here and there that were reporting on the missile attacks and the various things. And so we had the television was going all the time with CNN. So I mentioned that I got there before Christmas. Brought with me a couple of Christmas presents that my wife packed for me to unpack after I got there, which basically were calendars and those kind of things. But Bob Hope came to town. Now, if you're in the military and you're serving overseas, a USO show with Bob Hope would be the pinnacle of the experience in a wartime theater. Peaceful experience. He was not allowed to bring the bevy of beauties as he normally would bring with him, the young ladies that were showing their patriotism for the young men and women serving out there. So he brought his wife, Dolores, because the Saudis wouldn't allow unmarried and family-escorted females to come into the country. Their religious laws. So he brought his wife, Dolores, who was very nice and a very sweet woman, and the entertainer that he had, that he brought along was Aaron Tippin. And he also brought with him Johnny Bench. Aaron Tippin had a song that was popular on the radio back then. It says, if you couldn't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. He performed that song as well as a few others, and it was a good experience. It was a Bob Hope show. It was the kind of thing that you saw on newsreels or on the news reports when you were a kid, but I finally got to experience one. Right before the war started, a buddy and I were up traveling from Riyadh up to King Khalid Military City, KKMC, And on the way back, we saw the bridge and the land bridge that took you out to the island nation of Bahrain. And we knew that they had real beer there. So we thought we'd go across that land bridge and see if we couldn't secure us a real beer. Got past the first checkpoint, no problem. We showed our ID cards and our uniforms, and that was good enough. We drove another mile or two along, and there came a second checkpoint. Well, those guards weren't as amiable as the first ones and asked for specific papers, and we kept showing our ID cards, and they told us that wasn't going to work, and we had to turn around and leave that real beer where it was and head back to Riyadh. Again, being there before the war started, we were there for Christmas, and on Christmas Day, as the Army typically does, they go all out and provide you with all the things that we would expect to have back home on Christmas. Turkey and gravy and dressing, and so we were sitting in the mess hall, a bunch of us from my office, and eating, and all of a sudden there was this commotion, and we looked up, and here comes General Schwarzkopf walking into the mess hall. And he made his rounds through the mess hall, greeting all the tables of the soldiers and giving them his best wishes. And he told our table that since he couldn't be with his family back home, that he was going to be with his family here. And that was us soldiers. I didn't get a picture of that big event, missed the photograph. The only real combat that we had to worry about, or any kind of real wartime concerns in Riyadh, were the Scud missiles. And being that they weren't nothing more than an iron bathtub being slung in the direction of the opposing forces, you weren't ever sure where they were going to land, and I don't think the Iraqis knew where they were going to land either. They just kind of threw them and that thing just kind of went. Well, we had the Patriots there, and that was one of the things that I was responsible for reporting the status of. And our Patriots always took them out. There was very few sections that there was ever a Scud missile that landed without having first been taken out by a Patriot. And one particular Scud event that I can remember was I lived in a building, an apartment building that had been constructed outside the city of Riyadh that nobody ever lived in, and that we occupied as the U.S. military when we came there. And I actually had a shower. I'm very lucky, and I will not deny that was a lucky soldier over there. And I was in the midst of taking a nice shower when all of a sudden the warning alarms start going off. It kind of sounded like a tornado whistle like we have here. And the first thing that you were supposed to do was to don your protective mask and then put on the protective chemical gear, the charcoal suit, okay, which is just nothing but a cloth suit that has a foam interior that's embedded with charcoal to help filter the poisons. Well, I was in the shower. So I got out and I put my mask on, and I stood there looking at that charcoal suit, knowing that my soaking wet body was going to absorb every bit of that charcoal that was in that chemical suit. So I opted against the chemical suit, left the mask on, so it was my protective mask and a bath towel. I think that was probably mop level -1, because there were different levels for how many pieces you put on, and if the full mop level was 4 or 5. So at any rate, that was an interesting Scud attack for me. There was another where I was driving a vehicle and I was in a big hurry to get back to the building, because if you were inside, you didn't have to go through all of that. You had to put your mask on, and that was it. The one thing I have to admit that was pretty interesting about deploying there, because as we left Charleston Air Force Base, we weren't loaded on military airplanes, and I guess it was a whole new kind of war. We were being put on commercial aircraft that were chartered and had stewardesses and civilian crews and in-flight meals and the whole 9 yards. The only difference is that we went on board carrying an M16 rifle, broke it into 2 pieces, and put it in the overhead bin. That's not something that you'll see happening today at your local airport. Once the the war was over, and we were into what they were calling the reconstruction and the phase. My wife at home was expecting our third child, and the general that I worked for, he also found out through his executive officer that I had a baby due back home, and it was due very soon. This was March at this point, and so they decided that I would be amongst the first of the group of people to be brought back home. Only that was not nearly as organized as this trip there, and as people were being onesies and twosies here and there being selected to go back, you were basically scrambling to find whatever seat you could find on whatever military aircraft that was departing Saudi Arabia and heading west. So that took several days and some sleepless nights sitting in rather uncomfortable air terminals. They were not to be called airports. I don't know what they were. But I finally did make it back to Atlanta and got out processed and spent one night there, and then had a commercial ticket that brought me back to Huntsville. And again, I was in my uniform, and it's really pretty much all I had. I didn't have any civilian clothes with me. And so got off the plane in Huntsville, and well, I guess there was other people coming back besides myself, and there was television people, and so I actually got to be interviewed by the local news, and as I walked into Huntsville Airport, and they had local citizens that made it their business to be at the Huntsville Airport to welcome us home, and that meant a lot. I didn't have it bad. It wasn't all that scary, but it was good to know that what I did mattered.